justice for all.
A moment of silence, please. Thank you. You may be seated. All right. We will. First up is public comment. Do we have anyone? No one signed up. Would anyone like to participate? All right. There's another opportunity at the end of the meeting. So we will now move to the superintendent's proposed budget, including but not limited to district-wide. I'll turn it over to Dr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the board, I just wanted to review, we gave you some updated information yesterday. They represent the blue pages, which are updates, revisions to the proposed salary. And I wanted to first draw your attention to, I guess it would be the, behind the introduction, my letter, the budget overview. So just review that quickly, make sure we're all on the same page as we talk tonight about numbers. You'll see the changes have been made to the salary line and professional services, and all of those numbers now give us a proposed budget of $65,843,592, which is $1,802,900 as far as budget to budget change, for an overall percentage of 2.82%. So these numbers are important because in my next slide, I'm going to be referencing those numbers, and I want to make sure we were all on the same page with the 2.82. We appreciate the last two nights that we've had. We're looking forward to tonight, and we're going to make sure we make good use of your time. I wanted to make sure that you also had, as a follow-up to some questions last Wednesday, you have some supplemental information. There was a question about what are the courses at the high school that Mr. Corporal referenced, and so there are three things there as far as the course titles, and then the draft that we had come up with when we were considering having the credit recovery for both regular ed and special ed. That document is in there to just give you an overview of what that looks like. And then there was a question about the netting for the baseball field and that sort of thing. So that's what those supplemental documents are. Okay? So we want to make sure you had those. And if you're ready to go on, we're going to be referencing the PowerPoint. There are extra PowerPoints available if anyone would like a copy. They're over there. The first slide I wanted to bring to your attention is also a follow-up to last week and some questions as far as if it were a perfect world and we could have everything on our budget drivers that we had been presenting the last several months, what would that look like? And so I wanted to go through that with you just so you'll know, as a cabinet, what we went through with the principals and as a team as far as what we felt like we couldn't request this year in the superintendent's budget. And so I'll just go line by line quickly. There had been a request for an additional counselor at Sarah Noble, and you'll see the cost of the increase for the salary and then the benefits, what that would be if they were, I guess, an individual plus one is the category that we used. And then a part-time counselor at the middle school was requested, and then it was, we go on down, a department chair at Sarah Noble, part-time, 0.49, what that cost would be. The social worker, a classroom teacher at Hill and Plain, and then we had conversations about regular education, paras, or paras for the L program at Sarah Noble and what that cost would be. We looked at head teacher stipends, social worker coordinator stipend, special ed and regular ed credit recovery for the summer, the STEM coordinator and humanities coordinator in the instruction department, human resources specialist, support in the HR office. The strategic planning, the full request was $35,000 is what we knew it would cost us, but we felt we could at least get started this year with the $17,500 request. The athletic uniform, the full request was $101,192, which we reduced to the $38,000 that had been consistent. The band uniform request that was brought to our attention was not for this year, but was for next year. But since we had discussion about it last week, we put it in here. That would be $72,150. Moving Project Lead the Way In technology, if we hadn't done that to the capital plan, that would be an additional 25,000. This year, we also took 2 out-of-district placeholders. We thought we could do it with 4 instead of 6, anticipating how many additional placeholders we might need for a savings of 140.
Can I just ask a question on that? Sorry, you said that quickly, so I apologize. And how many placeholders are in the actual book?
4.
Okay.
And so, because we took 2 out. So the last 3, Project Lead the Way,
So you would ask for 6, is what you're saying?
no, I'm saying that this year we have 6, but we have, in this budget,
Yes.
we're only putting in 4.
Got it.
Okay. Because if we added those other 2 back in, that'd be an additional
I understand.
140,000.
I just want to
Okay.
get the numbers. Thank you.
Yep. And then turnover salary savings is 50,000 is what we would be putting back in the budget if we hadn't budgeted for it. So that gives us unrequested total, including benefits, 1,273,348, which we didn't request. What we're proposing is the 1,802,900, the 2.82. If we included all the things that we'd like to have, plus the things we've requested, it would be a 4.8% increase with 3,076,245. Does that help answer that question as far as what we left out and what we put in?
Thank you.
Yes. All right, and now we're going to move on to technology. Mr. Rush?
All right, well, thank the board, thank Dr. Parker and the team for having me here this evening. Appreciate it. So first thing, the technology team has done a wonderful job this year. I have one of my teammates behind me. They've been very welcoming and helping me and also helping the district with staff, students, faculty, everything, getting things up and running this year. So thank you. We'll jump right to it. So we'll start at Hill and Plain and Northville. The elementaries put them together. Chromebooks, so we'll start there. This is going to be a common theme among all schools. The first thing I want to note that Chromebooks have an auto expiration date, which basically means they do have a date when they expire. They will not receive updates anymore, which stops the ability to update certain apps that may be for SBAC or other assessments. So when those dates reach, we can no longer not that they can no longer upgrade, but it's potentially maybe a day where you can no longer upgrade. So it's best to replenish them once they hit that date. So looking at the slide, right now we have 212 Chromebooks between the elementary schools that need to be refreshed because they're at the end of life. They'll be at the end of life between now and the start of next school year. It's kind of been built into the refresh cycle based on current year's budget and this proposed budget that we're working on right now. Let's see. Chromebooks design, so just the way that the design of the Chromebooks in the classrooms, they're floating throughout the building, so there's 2 to 3 per building of carts, 25 a piece. Currently moving, so again, we're moving Chromebooks from the inventory and refreshing and looking into smart boards. So right now we have a smart board demonstration going on, actually in room 195, and inviting staff in, getting feedback, and also from our technology committee and deciding on the future of the smart board rather than continuing with the traditional projector and screen, because it's changed a ton where you can have kids interact with the board rather than just look at the board. So being able to integrate Chromebooks with devices or BYOD devices with our smart boards are kind of where we're going. The need at the elementary schools are really just to replace a lot of the older Chromebooks. We're at that phase where a lot of them are end of life and we need to replace them. It's not I wouldn't say it's really an option. We need to replace them because we are running the risk of kids going to test one day and then it's saying your device needs to be updated. And at that point, there's nothing we can do other than run to a lab or something, an alternative. All right?
Can I just ask a really quick
Yes.
question? So what is an expected life of a Chromebook? Is it 5 years, 10 years?
Depending on the
2
quality,
years?
if you buy a very cheap model, it could be 2 years, but if you buy the ones we buy in about 5 years, is what it's 4 to 5 years.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question on
Yeah,
that?
go
And I
ahead.
may be jumping ahead,
Sure.
so I apologize. The 200, you said 212 refresh?
212, yes.
Okay. Are those the Chromebooks that are embedded into actual budget or part of the capital at the end of the book? Where are
Capital
they?
at the end of the book.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Got it. All right. Sarah Noble, Chromebooks utilized for classroom instruction, capital collaboration, learning, and assessment. Designated per PLC with some floating carts, so a lot of them are designated per teams, but there are floating carts throughout the building. again, removing Chromebooks that are from our inventory that are expired is what we're working right now through next school year. And also, again, still exploring new smart boards, bringing those teams in from those schools as well to get their input and seeing what's the best solution for them. And the need, again, just to replace a ton of Chromebooks. And I'm not really speaking on desktops too much because with desktops, you can extend the life a bit on them, and with the way we use them in, classrooms is really a lot of Google Chrome, so we don't really need to replace them as fast as the Chromebooks, but the Chromebooks do have an end of life.
Brandon, what's the refresh number for Sarah Noble?
Sarah Noble, oh, sorry, it is...
55? No, 32 is what you have in the back of the book.
That's the current refresh number, yes.
32?
So it's 32 plus there are, I'm trying to find that number for you. 32 is what we have right now for next year, but there are current, sorry, Sarah Noble.
On the, she's referring to under your
Yes,
capital
32
5-year
right
plan?
now, so combined is about 140. That's considering right now we're replacing with current year's budget and going into next school year. But 32 is what we're proposing to continue the refresh cycle. So right now we have the ability to replace, we will be replacing
32 at Sarah Noble,
of
120.
115 right now and another 30, I mean, the number's not 140, but 115 right now and 32 going into the school year, next school year with this budget.
Okay,
Yes.
32, okay.
Yes, 32.
Just
Sorry, that
remind
was
me, what
confusing.
is the cost of a Chromebook?
$200,
200.
Thank you.
give or take $5, depending. You usually buy the Chromebook and a license with it as well.
Got it.
Sure.
Okay. The license is how much?
So the Chromebook itself is about $175
Okay, so
and
200 is
and about
inclusive.
$25 for the license for
Okay,
each Chromebook.
thank you.
Sure.
That's the consortium cost, right?
Yes, that's consortium pricing. Sarah Noble, let's jump ahead. Scatico. Again, Chromebooks utilized for instruction, collaboration, learning, and assessment. Chromebooks are allocated per team. Currently moving Chromebooks, again, moving from inventory. Exploring smart boards, focus on refresh. So at Scatico right now, this year, there are no requests for additional Chromebooks this year, just because they have such a large quantity of Chromebooks that need to be replaced. So next year, we're really going to focus on the replacement of those Chromebooks that they have, because they have many Chromebooks that have reached end of life and just end of usability. They don't work anymore, and they're sitting in classrooms or sitting in storage. So the numbers you'll see at the end of the presentation, I'll jump on that. That's because they haven't had a refresh in so long, and were one of the first to adopt the Chromebooks in the district.
So do you have the number of refresh for the 2021 school year?
Yes, so the refresh of the 2021 is, 55.
Thank you.
But this year, we have a number of 174, which we're replacing this current budget year, based on the funds we have now. So that'll happen in the next few months. Right. Other Chromebooks. So, and just not to, I don't want to pull away from that. They don't need the Chromebooks. They still need the Chromebooks just because they're also sharing Chromebooks between classes now. So assessments may be taking place in one part of the school where a team needs to pull from one classroom and they can't share with another classroom. So there's still that sharing model going on. So right now, I told them we should take a step back, focus on replenishing the inventory that we have, and then the following year, then making another request for additional Chromebooks. But right now, I don't think we're in a phase to buy more when we have not a clean
You're just
inventory.
trying to refresh the ones you
Yes,
have
yes,
rather
the
than
ones that are
adding
sitting
to
around.
the inventory.
Yes, yeah, the ones that are sitting around not
In
working.
this budget, we're already
Yes,
living that.
yes, we
So
are.
we're taking a break from that on this budget
Yes.
cycle. We're focusing in on the refresh, and
Yes.
then the following year, we'll come back to the purchasing.
Yes, we'll have a clean inventory,
Is that
all
where we're
devices will be,
going?
yes.
Gotcha.
And really the goal is by the start of next school year to have all devices up to date in terms of none of them are expired, which would, if we match the budget, we would meet that. Let's see. New Milford High School, same theme. Chromebook carts are shared between departments, staff training. So one initiative they have is to go greener with, through the Chromebooks by, digital learning. Currently exploring new smart boards. The need at the high school, additional Chromebooks, again, for a consistent supply of Chromebooks for student learning. Again, sorry?
113 is what you have for the new request for Chromebooks?
Yes.
And what's the refresh?
Yes, so sorry about that. Actually, it's 60 for next year. And right now, this year, actually, they adopted them a little later. So right now, their refresh counts are not so high as the others. They're kind of in the, not so much in the tail end like Scatico is of their refresh cycle.
So if you go under your capital 5-year
Sure.
plan, at the top of the page is all these numbers that he's talking
Exactly.
about.
Yes. So the 60, those numbers that, like the 60 is just for this upcoming budget year, the 2021 budget year. The following numbers are anticipated numbers going into the following years. Yes.
So the first column is really the budget that we're referring to.
Yes.
As anything else, looking at the plan, we're trying to take a snapshot of, putting something on a cycle on a 5-year plan.
Sure.
So you're just putting.
Yes, and now that we know, they actually have hard set dates for the Chromebooks expiration, so we can kind of plan that out and say, okay, we have this many expiring to 2021, 22, 23, and we just continue that cycle. All right. Chromebooks Fresh and Project Lead the Way machines. They are generally on a refresh cycle. This year will probably be the last time we do the 2 to 3 year recycle, since desktops are kind of becoming pretty standard nowadays, and the upgrades are becoming minimal. So this year we'll refresh the Project Lead the Way machines at the high school, trickle them down to departments that need those, such as the digital photography lab, and there's another lab that would need machines of that power, and replace the Project Lead the Way machines. Let's jump ahead. So here are our inventory numbers we have for the district for equipment. Jump ahead. So, and just to point out a few quick things. So Scadico's number, again, seems pretty high, but I want to say probably about 100 of those devices are end of life, unusable at this point, and they're just kind of sitting in the building waiting to get refreshed. And same thing with Hill and Plain. There's a difference between Hill and Plain and Northfield. There's a fair amount of older devices at Hill and Plain that'll be refreshed, so that number will drop where it'll be more evenly matched with Northfield going into next year.
Can I ask you a question,
Sure.
Brenda? 'Cause I'm a little confused,
Sure.
and I want to make sure that I have this right. So, you told us on our number 3 slide, I think it's number 4, that there's 212 refreshed between Hill and Plain and Northville, but that's not what the 5-year plan says.
Oh, I'm sorry, that includes current year's budget and going into next year.
Okay, so you're actually, it's just 6, because
Sure.
0 at HPS and only 6 at NES, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I can give you-
Because
I can-
that is the only number that I think is
Sure.
off. Okay, thanks.
Got it. So these numbers here, jumping ahead. Student information systems. So we're currently using Retrofit as our student information system provider. Jump to my notes here, sorry. For those who don't know, student information system is our student data exchange portal, which houses student data such as demographics, attendance, grades, performance data, and other data points. We're at the end of our renewal actually this year, so we went out to bid with whatever vendors would like to bid on the project. Only 3 came back, but we have those numbers in hand, and right now we're looking. We developed a committee to vet out the vendors and to look forward into the spring. So right now we're holding until this month's over, and then we're going to have probably an event, maybe an evening or a day where the vendors come on site, present their product, and then take the feedback and then make a decision depending on budget, so on and so on.
This replaces the portal.
This will replace, yes, the portal.
Okay.
So some people know it as Admin Plus, some people know it as the Plus Portal, some people know it as
Yes.
Gradebook. So all that'll be replaced. It's all the
Okay.
same product in the back end.
Is that from the opening of the proposed budget, is that the upgrade of the student
Yes,
information?
for the 60,000.
Okay.
60,000.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
No problem.
One time.
Yes, one time 60,000.
Explain that.
Yes. So it'll be a one-time 60,000 implementation fee. Once that implementation is over, it'll roll back into our normal $50,000 recurring operating fee for our SIS. So it's a 60 grand up front, and currently we pay 50,000 a year for our SIS. It'll be an additional 60,000 up front, and then the following year it'll roll back into a normal 50,000.
So it will be 60 and 50 because you're buying it, and so the first year will be 60 and 50, and
Yes.
then after that it will be 50
Yes,
for.
and it'll be 60 and 50 because we'll be overlapping with our current SIS and the older,
Okay.
with our older SIS and the new. They're running parallel for a bit, and then they'll drop off July of 2021.
Okay.
Retrofit, and then we roll into our new. All right, and then some of the issues we have with the current SIS. One big issue is that the database runs as a flat file. Not to get too complicated, but basically think of running a large Excel file, and that's really what our SIS is, and it makes it extremely slow, extremely sluggish, extremely hard to use. The interface is super unfriendly to end users, and we get numerous complaints. So that's one of the big the big sticking points. I won't go, we did a staff survey and the list was too long to talk about tonight, but I think it's.
Go on and on and on.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so basically we need a new SIS. All right, jump ahead. Copiers. So right now we're at the end of our 5-year lease with Rico. Right now we're going month to month on our copiers. We went out to bid and received a number of responses back, which we have in hand. Again, that's another thing we're waiting until later in the spring to make a decision on. 8 vendors came back, which is good, so we have options. Right now, it was about 37 printers with the current budget we're proposing. We would be able to replace all district copiers, leased and owned, that we currently work with. See, currently, sorry, complete fleet, aging reports. So again, there's aging printers, copiers right now that are breaking all over the place, and RFP is posted bids. So the need to replace all district copiers in a 5-year lease. With the new 5-year lease also will come the software, which will let us track, who prints how much, limit who prints how much, set user authentication at the device. So it's not just you print and it prints. You hit print and it goes to the device. You actually have to walk up,
Release it.
Release your print job, because a lot of the issue we have now is people print to the wrong printer or 500 pages. Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot that's the wrong printer. And then they go print another 500 there and back, and then it
Or
turns.
they never go and get it. And
Yeah,
so-
or never go get it, yeah. So, yes, it's a lot of waste. Decision for this is to be made this spring and for implementation to start July 2020. All right,
I have a question on that.
Yes,
What
sure.
dollar amount are we attaching to that?
116,000.
And where is that located in the budget,
That
please?
is in the operating,
It's in technology, it's in the DOGA
DOGA,
section.
That's what I
of
thought.
technology.
yes.
Is it page 73?
Yes, it is.
We're gonna find that embedded throughout, like, the DOGA portion, that piece, correct?
Correct.
That's
So
what I thought.
that's one of the changes within technology, not cutting off Mr. Rush here, but there's,
And as we go through DOGA, is the 60,000 in DOGA as well? For the
Yes.
student, the SIS?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just doing this without, okay.
and there are a bunch of other.
Yeah, the
realignments.
DOGA's an interesting read, there's a lot there, so.
There's a lot
Yep.
of realignments, and
Yep.
just while we're on copiers, I mean, the copiers used to reside within the fiscal services budget, and it's no longer there, and you're gonna
Right, there's
find it
been
in
some
Mr.
moving
Rush's.
around, right,
Yep.
so I just wanna make sure I know where to look for it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
But it's a flat, you want to explain that?
Yeah, so if you remember this time last year with Dr. Tracy, there was a request
Yes.
for revamping of copiers, with actually an additional request of money put into the budget. That was one of the things that we cut, because it wasn't something we had already, so it was easier to do without that than to cut something we held more dear. So when Mr. Rush started, we went and did an RFP and actually went out to vendors and found that we could, within our current budget, actually decrease our current budget and bring new machines online. The big change there would be that this would not be a 3-year lease on the copiers. We would have to go to a 5-year lease on the copiers. But the administrative team, and especially with Mr. Rush's opinion, thought that, that is something viable that we could do to be able to move ahead and replace a lot of these aging copiers that we have some major problems with in the district. But the opportunity cost there is that we would have to go to a 5-year leasing schedule.
Is that part of the 116,000,
The
the 5 years?
116,000 is going up to a 5-year.
It's gonna cover us for the 5 years.
For 1 year.
One of,
Yes.
but it's locking us into a 5-year lease, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
That amount is the amount that we think it will cost per 1 year. When you approve the budget, it's not locking us in. We still have to post the formal bid. The board still has to award it through operations, the
Right,
contract and everything.
that's the first year, our best guesstimate is
Yes.
116,000
Yep.
to at least get our foot in the door.
Well, that
And
would,
making the commitment, though.
that would get us a foot in the door as far as a year one.
That's what I mean.
But it would really mean more than getting our foot in the door, because it would replace not just our currently leased machines, it would fold in some of those legacy-owned machines that are a big problem.
Without having to budget a significant amount of money to do that. It was a flat, what we were paying this year and then
Yes.
moving forward.
So would that be 116 then for the remaining 4 years of the contract as well?
Yes, if whenever we enter a contract, the number that's shown there, 116,500, is our estimate based on the RFPs we got back, that it would be for each year
Okay.
of a 5-year new
So
deal.
it's
It's 116 times 5.
Well, yes, that's what I just want to make sure everybody's clear. It's a large commitment. We have to do, we have to take a look at this. Yes,
$575,000.
exactly.
And that's been our recurring fee from past time, actually lower than what we previously.
Yes,
yeah.
it has.
Yep.
And one thing to note as well
And that's
is
a good
that
point,
number,
thank you.
even though that's 116, it may increase, but we may have savings from other places. For example, we have 139 copies of printers in the district total. Only 37 are copiers. So part of the second phase of this project would be to roll up a lot of those classroom printers and put more copiers out in certain locations, just to limit all that little bit of toner that we buy, because it's pretty significant amount we spend on toner every year in the classrooms.
And to that conversation, that was part of the conversation last year about putting everything kind of on pause and coming in with a fresh look
Yeah.
to see where we could do that. And this number is lower than what we had been looking at. So that's an important point.
Yes, yes, definitely lower now, but for sure it would increase a bit over the years, but
Sure.
it would balance out with what we pay for toner every
Yep.
year. So, okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Mr. Munrick?
All right, thank you, everybody. I'm here to present the facilities budget for the fiscal year 2020-21. My goal here is to touch on custodial, then maintenance, and then finally wrap up with the 5-year plan on the back of the budget book. To start off, we're on page 58. And last Tuesday, you heard Dr. Parker in her opening statements mention how we have over 770,000 square feet of school space. I'd like to start off by trying to put that number into perspective. It's a big number, but what does it mean? Our district currently employs 30.5 custodians. That equates into over 25,000 square feet of cleaning per person per night. Or in other words, if your house was 2,500 square feet, you'd have to clean your house 10 times every night, Monday through Friday, to cover the same square footage our custodians do. And any of you that have young children like I do, my house doesn't stay clean for long, let alone if there's 20 or 21 of them in a room. So those square footage numbers don't take into account the over 200 setups that we deal with annually, like this one. This library does not look like this Monday through Friday. We have to set this up. So that's another task that our crew handles without fail. National Center for Education Statistics recommends 18 to 22,000 square feet per custodian per night in a K-12 setting. And I'm proud to say that even despite exceeding those industry standards, our staff really does turn out a really good finished product every single night, and that's a testament to their work ethic and drive to make the schools as clean as possible. Having the necessary manpower is one part of the equation to run the custodial department, and the other is the supplies and materials that they need in order to do the job. Our schools are cleaned using the green certified cleaning products as per board policy, and I'm happy to say through the work that myself and Mr. Aparicio, we do, working with vendors, checking pricing, going through inventories, we're able to only look for a 1.75% increase in the supply line for custodians for this year. We have no staffing changes recommended in this budget, despite being down 2 full-time custodians in the past 4 years. The controllable areas of my budget are nearly flat with a 0.47% increase, and most of that has to do with the uniform change as per the contract negotiations that we just wrapped up. So how is all this possible? Number one, we have a decrease in the overtime line, which is in your non-cert salaries, and you're also going to see a lot of small realignments in the other accounts, which help bring this to a 0.94% increase year to year. For the maintenance side, Dr. Parker spoke about our 187 acres of property that our staff maintain. In addition to snow and property maintenance, we get over 1,000 work orders a year. Work orders can range in complexity from building cello racks at the middle school to changing ballasts and light fixtures to hanging new water fountains. The skill and dedication of our maintenance staff cannot be understated. Having the personnel on staff saves this district thousands of dollars every year in contracted services. It's much more cost-effective and timely anytime an issue arrives to only need to purchase the materials that we need in order to remedy the situation at hand. Similar to the custodian side of the presentation, you see no requests for additional staffing despite being down 2 full-time maintenance workers in the past 4 years. There is a 1% increase in the controllable areas on the maintenance side, and those are attributed to basically two lines. Printing, which is BFY up there on the screen, that's a pure add. That's mostly driven by the need for my office to update our old paper architectural prints. We really need to digitize those and get to the 20th century. So that was a pure add. And there's also a 2.57 increase in contracted services. And a lot of that increase has to do with our Windows 7 migration and having new security systems in the district. They now need to be monitored and have software upgrades periodically. So once again, how is a 0.35 possible? Once again, we're seeing a decrease to the overtime line, small realignments throughout all the accounts in the maintenance lines, and the uniform line has also been adjusted based on the contract negotiations. Last but not least, in the tab in the back of the book is the capital 5-year plan. What I have up on the screen is a highlight of fiscal year 2021. What you don't see here are all the collaborative meetings and plans that we're having with the town to discuss projects that we simply can't handle through operating or even the capital reserve account. Projects not listed include roof replacements, asphalt replacements, energy conservation projects, and the like. But this is the short list that we've been discussing at Facilities Subcommittee for some time. And it's also important to note that the rooftop unit number 1 is not part of this recommended budget because it's been down since September, and we know we need to replace it before the cooling season comes upon us.
And the dollar amount on that, please?
The dollar amount on that was 65 and change.
65,000, yeah.
So that particular project is a good candidate for the energy conservation meetings and discussions that we're having, but timeliness is a concern.
Right.
Access control system is no longer being supported. It's outdated, needs replacement. That's our card swipe system that allows us access into all the buildings. Building automation, that started a year ago with the Windows 7 migration in our security cameras. It's now impacting the computer programs that operate our AC and heat for the buildings. So that needs to be done this year. Vehicle and custodial equipment is essentially a refresh. Our fleet and cleaning equipment is aging rapidly, and our costs to repair them are going up. The elevator retrofit at this school is a code change by the state of Connecticut. We're required to change the cylinder bottom in the elevator here for the new code. And last but not least, our fire alarm device upgrade at the high school. A year ago during the microburst, we lost the actual fire alarm panel, which was reimbursed to us through a insurance claim. But what was not covered were the actual devices, so those are on the plan for this year. You're welcome.
Okay. So in the Department of Instruction, the budget pages for that begin on page 40 with the staffing and 41 with the independent lines. I wanted to bring your attention to curriculum development. Each year, I request to the board funding for curriculum training, which was a part of the Curriculum Council, the district-led council's proposal for 3 half-days of release time for teachers to be trained on how to actually properly fill in the district template to ensure a viable experience for every student in district who takes a course under the Board of Education's proposed curriculum and approved curriculum. So each teacher attends the training for 3 half days. It's led by a facilitator, and there's the stipends paid per contract, $620 for a half year of curriculum writing, and for a full year course, $1,240. You'll notice that I'm requesting a $10,000 increase. The curriculum budget line has been flat year over year. We're proposing, based on the 5-year plan that the board approved last year, 72 curriculum to be written going into next year. That includes not only the writing of curriculum and the stipends, but the curriculum being written 3 times per year, fall, winter, spring, / summer, and the vetting of all the curriculum, which is done by the department chairs and myself. And of course, any textbook proposals that come out of curriculum writing then go to the board, those are not budgeted for until the next fiscal year. Professional development, There's a slight increase being requested there for professional learning. That professional services line covers all of the administrative professional development required by law around teacher evaluation and feedback. That we talked about in depth last year. It's classroom visits, helping administrators know exactly what to look for, and to provide feedback that teachers can turn around and use immediately in their classroom setting. Teacher education and mentoring, or the TEAM program, that is for our new teacher induction for first and second year teachers. We have to pay for the mentor stipends by state law and the dashboard to make sure that we're managing the teachers' finalization of each of the 4 modules that are required by law, because it's directly linked to them receiving their next level of certification by the state, of which I have to certify.
And is
I
that,
mean-
I'm sorry.
Yes, go
Is
ahead.
that team, it's a mandated but unfunded,
It's funded somewhat. Each year, we're not sure how much we're going to get back. It's never enough to cover the dashboard and the number of new teacher mentor stipends that we have to pay, because we have a significant number of new teachers across district each year.
thank you.
Okay? I'm actually going to be working, I was invited to work on the state board, so I'm attending my first meeting tomorrow, so excited about that. Teachers college training, we send the coaches and teachers across district to Columbia University for reading and writing professional learning. We find that they come back and can grow the curriculum exponentially with their new learning, which is great. And then we're trying to grow the number of teachers who can teach advanced placement courses, specifically next year in mathematics. We have teachers already signed on to attend coursework at Taft, and that tuition is built into this line as well. Then in this line, you also have the overall needs for teachers across district. We have our professional learning day in the beginning of the year, so we have to pay for our presenters and any conferences that teachers would like to attend over the course of the year. Content and instructional practices for departments or subject areas as needed. Any talented and gifted professional learning and EL professional learning across the state. And then support for teachers, again, with their own learning on the evaluation process. So all that is incorporated in that line. In the instructional testing and support for intervention line, along with state mandates, in my budget, you'll see the request to continue with Northwest Educational Evaluation Association. That's our K through 8 universal test that we use for screening. We identify students who are in need of intervention, who are qualified for TAG. That's one measure that we use. And we also track their progress to see how many kids will score adequately on the state assessment, so we could support them along the way and grow them over time. Livebook is what we use as our assessment database. We pull all of our assessment data from the state database, from NWEA, from our report cards. This is the work that I do with the data coach. We pull all of that into what's called the Livebook. That assessment system is then utilized by teachers. We're looking to make it more user-friendly, myself and the new data coach, by working with teachers and having them enter their data directly into the system, which will make it much easier to use. And then we can look at how a child is doing overall on several indicators, which is critical. We also run Frontline, that is our intervention management. We're required to keep those student intervention plans at the ready and look at them every 6 to 8 weeks to see if a student can be exited or needs a change in goal. RTIM is the system that we use to manage that. That's always been in my budget. It's continuing to be requested going into next year. By state law, tied to the teacher evaluation system, we must administer a climate survey each year. We've been using a company for the last 3 years. The building level administration and myself have found a new system, a new survey system. It's a little bit more economical than the one we were currently using. We're excited about the questions that we're able to ask, and we're in the process of looking those over, but that new amount is included in the lines in my budget. And then we've always used Lexia, which is a program that addresses oral language. It's great for students who are in intervention or are struggling in reading, so that's used by intervention for small group work. My department also oversees and supports all 504s in district, so there's money built in the budget for tutoring that's needed for students who are homebound and or are hospitalized, transportation for students who are injured and can't take the school bus to school and have a 504 plan, instructional testing that we have to do by state law and evaluations, inclusive now of the magnet schools, where students have 504s that reside there. And we use a system called 504 Direct. It's linked with IEP Direct. And we marry those together to get a discount with RTIM, but you'll find 504 Direct and RTIM in my budget, IEP Direct, and Ms. Olson's budget. I'm also the Homelessness Liaison for the district, and I just wanted to show you some of the numbers here. We're working really hard to work with families over the course of the year, hoping that they will find adequate, fixed, regular, adequate housing. But in the interim, while they are homeless, we have an obligation to transport students into New Milford from wherever they are residing. They could be doubled up, they could be in a hotel motel. We've transported kids as far as Bridgeport into New Milford, and we try to work with the families to make it transportation accessible to students who also want to participate in after-school activities. So we had 14 students who were identified as of January 3rd of this year. Again, that's a fluid number. We're very fortunate that we have people across the state working very hard to find housing for each of the individuals that were in that number in January, so it's lower now, but we provide transportation, and we also have to provide transportation for students who are in foster care placements by law. Also in my budget, I house all the summer programming for grades 3 through 5. We only have one major program. This is also funded with some title funding. We have one administrator of the summer school program, 4 teachers, and 1 paraeducator, and then the transportation for that, as well as the middle school algebra for grade 7, where students are invited if they have a certain cut score that may allow them to take this course, score 80% on the assessment, and then enter into Algebra 1 the following school year. Both of these programs have been highly successful. We've seen those 50 students grow not only within the summer program, but we've seen long-term gains beyond their time with us at Sarah Noble and beyond. I also am the Director of Adult Education. So you'll see that some of the opportunities that we've afforded with Christy Martin, who is the facilitator, are up on the screen. She has done a tremendous job in creating meaningful opportunities for all of the students in adult ed to graduate with a GED, a high school diploma, and she's worked with EL students to help them gain citizenship and to learn English, acquire English, and then even get into the high school diploma program and begin working. She added this year the National Work Ethic Credential. She piloted that for mandated students with plans to extend it into the community next fall. That really is to help all students who are in adult ed understand what it's like to go out into the workforce and what's expected of them before they get there. We work really hard at providing online hands-on opportunities in the classroom. There's some examples there of all that's offered and all the wonderful community partnerships we have already with adult ed. We're excited about, you heard about the work that I'm doing with the mayor's office around MedInstill and manufacturing. The same is happening with adult ed. We're working with Naugatuck Valley on a partnership for the fall of 2020 to have an advanced manufacturing partnership with them in place for students in adult ed. We're hoping it'll be a seamless transition for students who may come out of day school and enter into adult ed. But as it develops, we'll be working with Naugatuck Valley to make sure that that happens. This is just some of what I already talked about. We have the certified program facilitator that's mandatory by state law. She's also our disability contact, the GED registrar. She works under me. We have to have an adult education evaluator because you may recall previously I was also going over to adult ed at night and evaluating all of the teachers because the facilitator doesn't carry the credentialing in order to be able to conduct all the evaluations. We have a stipend position that continues to be included in order to cover those evaluations. I still read all of the evaluations. I meet with Christy and the evaluator just to make sure that they're in line with the recommendations for the state. We also offer mandated ESL. We have a great teaching staff in that area. We have our certified guidance counselor. We offer enrichment, and that integrated English language civics grant, you heard in the beginning, the opener, that we're asking for $38,000 in the budget because we're no longer eligible for this grant. Basically what happened is it's a federal grant and the number of EL students that you need to even apply for the grant has increased so significantly that although we have about 50 to 60 students right now that are EL students, they make up the majority of our adult ed population, we still don't have enough to apply for this grant. This grant is critical for us to, this money actually in operating is critical for us to have because it directly affords opportunities for the students who are participating in our EL program to turn around and get jobs in our community. So it's helping your local economy by investing in the students in adult ed, which are the majority of our students. I'll say that again, in terms of our student population. I'm also in charge of the computer-based instruction program, the expulsion program upstairs, along with the high school. We work together with Ms. Olson. We have Odysseyware licensing that we pay for that you'll find in the high school budget, and that's for students who are placed in central office. We have a .6 teacher upstairs who I check in with as well as Ms. Olson and the high school administration staff. Guidance goes up there to provide support. We've provided hands-on learning experiences around PE credit. We have yoga going on and mindfulness now upstairs, and the students learn how to play basketball for credit in PE. But what's unfortunate about the computer-based instruction program in terms of supplies is that when students go upstairs, and we have the most students we've ever had, about 19 right now, the Chromebooks come out of the high school count. So as a student exits the high school or goes into a placement up at central office for any reason, a Chromebook has to come out of the high school to be supplied to the student, which is great for that student, but it reduces the count that's accessible to students at the high school. So I just wanted you to know that information. Also in my budget, as you know, historically, is the agri-science enrollment and tuition. I just wanted to bring your attention that in 2020, 2021, we will continue to have 9 students at Nottowag and 11 students who will be eligible to enter into Chapag's agri-science program. Eventually, you can see by 22-23 school year, all of our students will migrate to the Chapag agri-science program. Here's the cost to you, to the board and to the town for each of the agri-science and magnet school seats. The magnet school in Danbury is a K-5 school. We have 18 seats there. The tuition cost per seat is $2,100. The total tuition cost to New Milford to send our kids there is $37,800. For Nottowag and Chapag's agri-science program, we have 20 seats total between those two entities. The tuition cost to district per seat, $6,823. The total tuition cost to New Milford for agri-science programming, $136,460. And I promised, oh, yes?
Can I just ask you one question?
Yes.
So, because we're phasing out Nottowag, when the students right now who are making decisions on if they want to go to New Milford High School or if they want to go to the Ag STEM, we are no longer allowing them to go to Nottowag. We've already made that switch and said it's Chapag now.
Correct.
So we're going to keep the students there who are already there so they can graduate out of that school, but all new are going to the new.
That's correct, but this happened last year.
Yes.
So last year, the state made the decision that we could no longer send our students to Nottowag. They basically redistricted, and New Milford's district became the Chapag Agri-Science Region 12 school. I wanted to add also, thanks for asking for that clarification, Tammy. I wanted to add that the transportation costs for next year for these two programs will still be at 0. We don't know if there'll be a cost for the following school year, but you don't see an increase in the budget for transportation because we've worked that out with the bus company this will be the second year in a row that there'll be no additional charge for transportation. We don't know how many buses we'll have yet. That's figured out later, but there's no increase.
So is the tuition the same at both Nottowag and at Chapag?
It is, yes. Yes, and that amount is offset by state funding.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are we filling the 20 seats?
So we have filled all of our seats at the agri-science for Chapag that we had for this year, the 8. And we did we fill all 12, Mr. Giovanone? I want to say we were very close. 11?
I think it was 11 of the 12.
Yeah, 11 of the 12. We're very close to filling them all.
Has there been a request by students above and beyond that number to enter the program where we don't have a seat?
So what happens is, as seats open up, the superintendent there has been great with keeping in touch with us to say, they have a list actually of students who may have applied who are eligible to get in, and so she'll keep in contact with us and then let us know there's an opening, and we'll get an acceptance letter that we sign off on to say that the next student in line is available to come. I'm not privy to how many students are on that list that they've accepted. So I can't answer the question about whether or not there is a wait list beyond what I know. that there is one. I don't know how many are on there, that's what I'm saying.
What do we do between 8th grade and 11th grade to make our students aware of this program?
So Region 12 actually comes out to the middle school. They were there today. As a matter of fact, they start talking to the students about it, presenting it's up to the actual school who is recruiting really to come on site and they have access to the kids. So they're able to talk to them about programming, talk to them about the experience. They did this last year. They really did a nice job. They send out information to parents. We tweet it. We make sure that parents are aware that they're coming and that it's an offering, that our district, has seats that are available if their child chooses to apply. And that's really our role, is to allow them the opportunity to come in and talk about their programming with our kids. All of the marketing is all done by the school who is trying to onboard kids. And then I promised I'd just share with you a little bit about building administrative responsibilities. I know each year you ask about, how much time are spent on each individual administrator with all types of their responsibilities. These are some of the topics that we brainstormed together that we thought were really important parts of their work. They work regularly with dysregulated students. Those are students who are really struggling, maybe with mental health issues for that day, or they're just dysregulated because something happened at home or something happened on the bus and they're really emotional and they need some support. Discipline referrals, they're dealing with discipline on a regular basis. They're conducting investigations. They have to do bullying investigations by state law and also Title IX investigations, which take a significant amount of time. You're talking about actually conducting the investigation, doing all of the interviews, conducting all of the write-ups, meeting with the students, meeting with the parents, and then coming up with a plan to move forward. They deal with mediations between students, the actual teacher evaluation process, which is quite lengthy. They meet for goal setting with each teacher, which takes it could take 42 minutes or longer. Sometimes it could take 2 periods to review what the goals are, because teachers have to have academic goals. They also have to have goals for their own performance and practice related to that Common Core of teaching. And then each administrator has to go in and evaluate. And most teachers have at least 3 evaluations over the course of the year, both informal and formal. I'm going to show you some data in a little bit, which I just want you to keep in mind. The majority of administration tends to go between formal evaluations, which are 30 minutes, and informal evaluations, which last about 20. So there's a range of time that's spent actually in the classroom gathering information. Then you have the mid-year conference, which is another 42 minutes or longer, where you review all the data on the goals from the beginning of the year and check the progress and talk to the teacher about how things are going and review their current, how they're doing currently with their own performance and practice goal. And then they go back into the classrooms and they're doing more evaluations to finish them. Anytime there are new teachers to district, new teachers have more evaluations than teachers who are veterans, and that's just the way it's balanced by the way that the SEED handbook came out from the state. And so our building administrators, not the APs, but the actual building leadership, they take the bulk. They actually have all of the new teachers. That's defined as teachers in their first 2 years. They take them on and they have the largest number. So when you look at the building administrators' data versus the APs, you'll see that the time of the building administrator is really spent doing the bulk of the work of evaluations. Then they have meetings with parents who, they need to speak with, and students who come down. Any questions or concerns that they might need to address around lesson planning or curriculum. Reentry meetings, case conferences, PPTs and 504s, DCF referrals, 211 calls, 911, scheduling that they're responsible for. They are my building test administrators. I oversee all the district testing for all of the state testing. And at the building level, the guidance department handles SAT, and then in each individual building, they report to me for Smarter Balance and the science assessment. They also are they're supported with running professional learning for teachers during faculty meetings. So they have to plan for and implement that based on our goals. They have all their daily duties, their events, their assemblies that they run, their evening events, and any administrative team meetings that they come up to central office for that they hold as team meetings in their buildings. So that's just a snapshot of all the work of what a building administrator does. I met with each of the elementary principals and the assistant principals to gather data on this, and this is really their first go at it. I asked them to think about, and this is an example from an elementary principal, how many hours you spend a month on each of these areas. And we calculated a day, as I did anyway, as a 7.5-hour day. But when you add up the amount of hours that they're putting in over the course of the month, times the number of hours in the month, you'll quickly see, specifically at the middle school with assistant principal duties, that it far exceeds the hours in a day. So I know you were asking for this, and we just wanted to put something together. As I said, here's an assistant principal sample. This was really a heavy lift because we had to brainstorm all the areas that they would cover. We pulled all the discipline data that they enter into our system, our SIS system, to try to quantify this. We looked at the number of hours that they're spending on each of these investigations and duties. And so, as I said, this is our first kind of go at it, but we're hoping we can firm it up over time and get better at marking this data over time and capturing it so it's as accurate as possible.
Can I just offer a suggestion?
Yes.
Just kind of make them consistent, because the elementary has numbers and the junior high has hours, so it would be easier to have, I think, numbers personally. Yeah, it's easier to measure.
Okay.
Well, it should have both, shouldn't it?
Well, if they can, that's
If
fine.
they
but-
can, yeah. As I said, this is,
It's quantity times
Yes.
labor, right?
as I said, this is our first attempt, so we're open to suggestions, so we'll take those
No,
and
that's
we'll
good.
continue to meet and talk it over and see how we can make it better.
I mean,
So
I
thank
have
you
to-
for
I have
that.
to say, this is super helpful. I mean, because, you know, we hear all these things, but it's so abstract that this is like, oh, you had 12, you know, that's, I know that. And so somebody says to me, what's the assistant principal? Well, you know, they're doing, 37, whatever. So this is super helpful, super helpful.
Thank you. And they worked really hard. Like, I have to give the administration credit. This took a lot of hours and a lot of thought, and I just wanted to make sure that I was mindful of some of the questions that you might have around the evaluation process and how long that actually takes. That's not quantified here. And what's also missing here is, I expect them to go into classrooms and work alongside
That's
teachers.
exactly what I was
And
thinking.
that's not here.
That's
So,
right.
they're doing that.
Right.
But that's not quantified, and that really, we struggle with that. We try really hard on a regular basis to get into classrooms, and I'm not saying just walk in a classroom, say hello to the kids and walk out, but actually go in, outside of the evaluation, walk through and get a sense for how is this program going? How are teachers doing? What are their struggles, and how can I listen to them and support their needs? That's happening, but we would like to do it more and in a more organized fashion. It's just incredibly difficult with trying to balance it, and that's everywhere. But I just wanted you to see this because as you make decisions, I think it's important to note that any change in administration, it takes all this data and it doubles it on everybody else who's left behind, making it even more difficult for us to organize around getting into classrooms and really focusing and honing in on that instruction that we hold dear. That's the reason why we're here, alongside all of these other reasons that are just as critical and key. But we know we can't access kids if they're dysregulated. We need to get them to that sweet spot where they can access their learning again so that we can meet their needs.
Alicia, can I ask
Thank you.
can I ask a quick question before we move on? Last year, you had asked for an administrative position. And in some of our curriculum meetings, you had talked about how you were looking to retool that request into not an administrative position, but more of like a coordinator. I don't see that in this budget.
So if we go back to the first slide in your handout.
Okay.
You'll see that I requested, I had basically my first, out the gate, I went back to that director position. I really struggled with what was going to give us more boots on the ground, as I like to say. I really want the teachers to be more supported. I spoke a lot about the level of professional learning that they're receiving, and there were multiple departments that you heard me say, they're looking to me and I'm looking to them. So I kind of moved away from that director position, knowing that it would be viewed as very administrative, even though if you know me, you know what I'm working on with the coaches, and I would have that person on site as much as possible, to asking for 2 coordinator positions. They would be 2 lump sum positions, one being humanities. They would cover English language arts and social studies, so that'd be reading and writing and social studies across district, giving me and the teaching staff, that vertical alignment we're trying to achieve so hard, and we've been trying over the last 4 years in Curriculum Council to get.
So where is that, though? I don't,
So it was caught before, it's not in the actual numbers that you're
Part of the
seeing.
wish
It was
list.
part of the COTS.
it is part of the wish list that
Part
she
of the
gave
wish
us?
Correct.
Can you point, I'm sorry, because I was looking for
That's
that.
okay.
and Because I
It's
wanted
there.
to
I
make
saw
sure it
it.
was captured. Can you please point that out?
So it's,
Oh, here it is,
right in the
humanities
center, you
coordinator?
see it, STEM coordinator and
Those two.
humanities coordinator.
All right, thank you.
Those are K-12.
Thank you.
Ms. Olson?
Good evening. I ran across a quote actually today, and the quote went like this: "The smartest person in the room is the room. The collective talents, the collective vision, efficacy." So when I think of the Board of Ed and I think of these budget hearings, and I also include the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the foundation of special ed services for students, it really is everyone. And I appreciate the board and your support in the past and moving forward. And this budget tonight really represents two departments that I want to focus on: the Department of Pupil Personnel, which includes services for all students, and the Department of Special Education that focuses on students with disabling conditions. Okay, I know that we've talked a little bit about demographics throughout these last few nights, but I want to focus on our snapshot. Every October 1st, we take a snapshot of the numbers of special ed students that we have in district. And if you look back from 2014-15, you do see the trend line going up. Now, this is a magnified graph, if I dare say so. I mean, you can tell that it starts at 565, but I wanted to emphasize that the number of identified students in the district is not going down, it's increasing. This chart also includes our 3- and 4-year-olds. It includes our school-age children, and it also includes our children in the Litchfield Hills 18 to 21-year-old program. Also included in this, these numbers are our students who are placed by the Board of Education in therapeutic or out-of-district placements. Another good way to look at this is when we compare ourselves to the state, because the state takes data and they take those October 1st data points from us and they compile them. So if you look starting with 2012 and 13, you can see that the state had an average prevalence rate of 12.1 students out of 100 being identified as special education, whereas New Milford had 13.4. You know, not significant, but significant enough that you can see that we had been slightly more identifying students. But over the years, and I would say the last 3 years, the state has actually surpassed the district. So on average, there are more students identified in school districts with special needs than we're identifying. I think we're very good at our identification process. We follow our state eligibility requirements very carefully, but you can see that more and more students with handicaps are being identified. I believe part of it is due to mental health issues in the early grades, even the middle grades. There's a higher identification with autism and then also ADHD. So the private and public out-of-district placements are a huge piece of my budget. And we spent quite a bit of time the last few years talking about our out-of-district placements because we are mandated once we have, you know, satiated all of our resources and supports, and if we can no longer meet the needs of the students, then we need to look at more restrictive environments. Now, if you look at the graph, you can see from 13-14, and again, this is a bit of a magnified graph, but other than that outlier from 15-16, we have held steady. The number of students that we've placed out of district, you know, last year it was 32, and this year, next year, I'm projecting 32 students. Now that includes students in private therapeutic schools, public therapeutic schools, and it also includes mediated placements. Now, mediated placement is when parents have due process rights and they can take us to a mediation and where we have to agree, or we would like to agree on a settlement. We have 8 mediated agreements in that 32, that number of 32. So that's important to keep in mind. We also have placeholders, and we've talked a lot in the past about placeholders, and I want to expand on that a little bit tonight. But right now, we have 4, as Dr. Parker said, 4 private placement placeholders and also 2 public placeholders. And I want to clarify, it's not just a placeholder for a student who might be moving into district. That does happen. But it also includes students in our district. After we have done everything possible in terms of placement services, programming, and we can't meet their needs, we, as a district, look at outplacements as well. So that's also included in that. This year, we've had 4 outplacements. So I just want you to kind of keep those numbers in mind. And we've talked in the past as well about a placement can go anywhere from, 60,000 to 300,000+. We haven't had those recently, but we have in the past. So those are important factors to keep in mind. This is my 8th year as director, and I have never once had to come to the board to ask for additional funds. We've come close, but we've always been able to maintain our projected numbers.
Is 15-16 the year we started the ESS program?
It was 3 years ago, so it also, the 32, we had some children age out of the program too, so that was part of it. They turned 21. But yes, we did have a few returning because of the ESS program.
Is the ESS program helping
Yes.
to keep the number down?
It is. It's helping with attendance, it's helping with grade point average, it's helping with discipline. Numbers are going down, both at the middle school and at the high school.
And out of the 4 that you're foreseeing, are they public or are they private?
It's really hard to predict. It could be either or. And sometimes those costs are superficial, because it could be a student who comes into district and is outplaced, and we maybe get 2 months into his program or her program, and they need an aide in a private therapeutic school, so that could be an additional $40,000. So that placeholder money isn't just for someone coming into district. It could be a child with even more significant needs that we've placed out. And when you compare us to our DERG, which I did, you can see that New Milford, out of 100 students with special ed needs, 3.6 are placed out, whereas the state average is 5.2. Now, unfortunately, the state is very late with their data always. This is from 16-17, but I'm confident in my numbers. We have hovered right around the low 30s for many years. I do believe, though, that if we had a snapshot as of October 1st, 2019, the state average would be higher than that. I'm going to move on to Litchfield Hills. Litchfield Hills Transition Program is in its 13th year, which is hard to believe. It services our students with special needs between the ages of 18 and 21. They are mandated services for our students. It provides those post-secondary supports, job placements, transportation. We have a number of our students who are working now independently at Stu Leonard's or Big Y out in our community because they've gained those skills through our program. They also help with that job placements. They have transportation protocols where our students learn how to take public transportation independently. We also offer tuition for our other nearby school districts. We have right now one student who's applying, another one is moving in from another town. So already I can see next year our numbers are going to bubble up a bit. And it does, it's a cost savings benefit for the school district. We don't have to place our students out. Transition programs can run anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 plus transportation. So not only are we doing best practice by keeping our students in district, in their community, we're also saving money.
Laura, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
A couple months ago, we had a conversation about us maybe not being able to utilize the max anymore. Has there been any further discussion? Because we had really wanted to continue that as an ongoing discussion about alternate locations if we then had to move. And it was all about us being able to utilize that space in a certain amount of time, right?
Right.
And liking the proximity of being in the middle of town where they had more independence to be able to
Right.
do certain things like go to the bank or, go shopping. So
We haven't done a lot. We did look at some sites in town, but was as far as it went. We also were talking about working with the building use, the town use committee to see what there was actually in town for some type of collaborative effort. Again, being in town, I think, is really important. We've talked with the youth agency already because they are really involved in the MAX, and maybe there can be some opportunities there in terms of new leadership on their part. Maybe we can work together to make that happen. So the short answer is no. The long answer is there are some things, but it has to be a focus in the next 6
But
months.
is there a threshold to where we need to move this program, or is it just you're trying to work with the limitations that they currently have? So is there a time frame to where you're going to see that this isn't going to work out anymore? Because really, we don't want to be working around their needs. We want to work around the needs of our students, and I'm afraid we're going to get to a point where we can't.
There are limitations. Right now, the students are thriving. They're meeting their IEP goals and objectives. The staff at Litchfield Hills is phenomenal. They work very hard to make it work for those kids. But we are going to see an increase in 2 years in the population there, and so we need to be looking closely at whether or not we can still meet the needs of the program there. I'd like to see some culinary. We have limited use of the kitchen. I mean, there are a lot of factors. So that's going to be a focus for us. And next year's budget probably will reflect some requests for increases.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is a breakdown right now of the years. As you can see, we did have an increase, 15, 16, 17, 19, 18. Those students aged out. And so now we're a little bit lower, but again, it will increase. And the staffing, which is pretty straightforward. We do have related service there, and consult for OTPT, I believe. Just real quickly, I just have to do a shout out for all the fabulous businesses in town and in our community that offer their stores, shops, schools, churches up for our students. And with nothing in return other than just wanting to see our kids progress. And I have to thank them. So finally, we do have our professional service line, and when you look at the budget lines, you see these big numbers.
Right.
And
Thank you for this slide. Thank you in
it could take up a
advance.
whole slide.
Yeah.
In the Department of Special Education, there is a professional service line, and I just want you to know there's quite a bit in that line. There are 23 contracted student care workers. They work throughout our school district. In fact, 2 of them are job coaches at Litchfield Hills. They work with our more complex students. 4 of them right now have actually gone through the training and are registered behavior technicians, which is, definitely a certification that we look for in terms of helping our students with more dysregulated behaviors. We also have our IPP, which we have a long-standing working relationship with at Institute of Professional Practice. And we have behaviorists that work in all of our, K-5 schools. They do a tremendous job working one-on-one with our students, helping shape the behaviors, and the focus is increasingly becoming getting them into the general ed classroom alongside their typical peers. It's all about that early intervention piece. Our Bcba Supervision, we added a Bcba this year because of the increased behaviors and needs that we found in all the buildings, so that contracted service works at Scotticoke in the high school. And all of these services do their own recruiting, their own training, their own substitutes, other than the student care workers. We have to work with them, but it's a cost savings in many ways for our district. And that's it.
Do you want
Any
Anthony to
questions?
go ahead and do the Douglas, or do you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to perhaps request maybe at the board chair's discretion that if we're going to go through page by page for facilities, Department of Special Education, pupil personnel, and Department of Instruction, that maybe we might want to do that now before we jump into DOGA.
Sure.
It's up to you guys though.
Can I have a question for Laura?
Yeah, go ahead.
Laura, how do you monitor that these services are happening in the schools when you have so many providers? I mean, do they have a sign-in sheet, like Does anybody monitor them?
So the easy way to answer that is to say the IEP is the monitoring system. The IEP has a services grid, goals and objectives, and we have planning and placement team meetings. So if you have OT, PT, or OT services 20 minutes a week, that occupational therapist will be at the PPT and will report on progress and will substantiate, they all keep logs, but will substantiate the services. So those are the types of pieces. Our administrators are fabulous. They keep a pulse on what's happening in their buildings. We have, 2 supervisors, which have now helped tremendously in terms of not just providing the services, but really encouraging that high quality, service for our students. So I'm real pleased with that piece of it.
Okay, it is 15 after 8. We still have a long night ahead of us. Do you want to go page by page? Do you want to call out page numbers if you have questions? Go ahead.
It's the chair's purview, but I think that if we go through pages, we should go through section by section. If board members want to call out something, we have a double executive session, and, and board members can always come back and ask questions.
But I don't want to rush anybody.
Because
so-
I think, exactly. So you want to make sure everybody's questions. Where are we starting?
So I'm fine with whatever you decide.
Okay, so
What section are we starting with?
start Department of Instruction.
Thank
Any
you.
questions in that?
I just had one question. In 2019, there were 7.5 tutors and an increase of 2.50%. In 2021, there's 9.50 tutors, so that's a +2, but their money is down 14.90%.
Is that because of the grant change?
I'm sorry, where are
Page
you?
40.
Page 40.
Page 40.
Page 40. No?
40, 41. 41.
Second line.
Got it.
Yeah, you're down
So,
25.
Please,
Thanks
go ahead.
for that. The reduction that was made there was taken based on past vacancies that weren't filled. If you look at what was actually spent on page 41, if you go over a few columns, the actual that was spent there in 18-19 was only $116,378. So a lot of those tutoring positions, while we do have an FTE budgeted for them, I think go unfilled for certain portions of the year. I think Mr. Corpo can talk a little bit about maybe some of the changes that we might see coming forward about restrictions in hiring those positions.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So this was one of this is the position where we're requiring a certified teacher to take on a tutoring position, so it makes the position extremely hard to fill. Because the pay is very, very low, and if you're certified, you're hoping to actually get a salaried position in a district. The other piece of this line is that this is where funding comes from for 504 tutoring. It doesn't have its own separate line. So we have allocated funding for all the hospitalizations, for all of the private tutoring that has to happen when kids can't attend school, and that's a part of this. So as Mr. Giovannoni said, we took a look at the historical numbers, and we think that we'll be able to reduce that line in order to fill the positions we have and to maintain the level of service we're providing for students who have
The
tutoring.
good point is you have 2 more tutors here. You have 9 instead of 7 last year, and less money. So that's, the tutors this year are 9.5, and last year there was 7.50.
Right.
There's also interaction there with tutors that are paid out of the grant.
Right, that's what I meant.
It's not,
Yeah.
they're not
That's-
additional
But the grant is the
positions.
same as
We're up tutors, but down money. Nice way to go.
Any
Depends
other
on
questions?
That's all.
DOI?
I
That's
do,
correct.
Page 42, the tag program. So travel, I know that we've had movement in this area because we have a new tag coordinator.
Yeah.
The travel is up by 50% and the supplies are up by 117.78. So I'm just kind of wondering what kind of travel and supplies are we needing?
So the travel amount we upped because we found that the new position, that new tech teacher, she's having to travel more for different professional learning experiences. She's new to the position.
Okay.
We try to bring in people to do training as much as possible. We recently brought in someone to do the COGAT training. But if we couldn't have gotten that person to come to district, I actually would have had to get her to that training, and it was very far away. She would have had to cross state lines. So I'm finding with TAG specifically, the training is not offered locally. We've been trying to pair up with UConn whenever we can, but she's going to be having to do more travel than has had to be done previously. And also with the
So to
supply
that point,
lines.
it's $100, right?
It is.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
I just
yes.
wanted, when,
No,
and-
yes,
and no,
yeah.
you're right, but when
But there's been movement
there are
in this
people
area, yeah.
that, don't have the budget book in front of them, we're up, it's $100 differential, not that that's,
Yes,
but it's
that's
not.
right. That's
okay,
right.
I
It's
just
not
wanted to know that.
so significant,
Big
but
gap.
100 is
Yeah.
100.
Okay, one more question on page 42.
Wait, I
Um,
just
and
just
then
want
the
to hit the
supply line.
supplies. Yeah, the supply line.
Fine.
So we took a look at all of the curriculum extensions and the enrichment opportunities that are being had for students, and that number varies from year to year based on the number of supplies that are necessary for each of those enrichment experiences, and on top of the extensions that the TAG teacher is conducting in the classroom. We have more students that are being serviced than previously.
Okay.
Because we're doing the universal screener and we're catching more students, and we're on a really nice cycle. So between the 48 students that we have in one building and the 38 in the other, we found that we were running short on supplies. And there's some new things, quite frankly, that the
Well, that was
teacher
my
would like to
question.
do.
Are we branching out and doing
Yes.
different kinds of things other than what we were doing?
She's
Okay.
very innovative, so
Okay.
we're looking, and she's made reductions in other lines, you can see, in the instructional supply line. These lines are also shared with the science enrichment teacher, so it's not just the TAG teacher, and they've done a nice job, in my opinion, of reducing the budget pretty significantly, almost $6,000 worth overall.
Thank you.
So-
Yeah, that was 1,000,
Yes.
so I just wanted
Yes.
to.
Yes.
Okay, the question I had, under test, there's your assistant superintendent salary, and under curriculum development, are those both you?
Yes, because at
Okay,
one
you
point in
said
time,
that.
you had 2 assistant superintendents. One who was in charge of curriculum and instruction, and the other who was the assistant superintendent, did everything else.
Still carry that on two lines?
So that was never, yes, they were never merged, they were left in the line, so.
I figured it was you,
yes,
but,
That's correct. It's one, I'm one person.
okay.
And
Thank
2
you.
lines.
Any other questions, DOI? Okay, pupil personnel?
On page 47, you say there's 6 social workers. Are they for SPED, or are they through the whole
For
system?
everyone. They service all students?
All students, yeah, every grade, K to
everyone.
12. Okay, thank you.
So, okay, I'm on page 50. Under counseling, is this a new position? Because it was 0 for 18-19 through 19-20, and now it's an $83,000.
That's a substance abuse counselor. We weren't able to fill that position until this year.
So
Gotcha.
that's linked with the second and fourth line there. It was originally budgeted and unfilled as a professional service on
Gotcha.
that page, and if
Right.
you remember.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
balancing out a little
It's
bit then,
balancing out.
okay.
During this, at operations earlier
Yes.
this year, we actually did the transfer to make 1920 reflect that on a revised basis, but here we're
Exactly.
going original to original.
Right.
And that's why you're going to show it.
Yes.
Exactly. And I think we had that conversation at operations, you might have mentioned that.
We have a long night, and I'm not going to go into it now, but at some point after this, I'd like to get some information about this substance abuse counselor, what we're seeing as far as progress in this area, or we're not making progress. It's too long tonight to get into it.
But we had
tonight,
asked for that the other night,
Right.
and some of
So
that
I'm going to
data.
ask you.
And that's what, we had that conversation, she has been with us about a month.
6 weeks.
So we want to
Oh,
get
all
some
right.
data.
Yes.
We really can't measure,
Right.
I don't think yet. We think by the end of by May, we'll at least be able to say how many students she's seen, what's happened, but right now it's,
I'll wait a few months.
She's between the 2 schools, right? So I don't know.
She has, well, right now
Scattercook.
we're going to split her with 1 day at Scattercook and 4 days at the high school
for next year.
for next year.
Anything else?
Yeah, on the same page, I'm looking at 2 items, this page 50 again.
Thank you.
Supplies, non-instructional health services, and salary certified psychologists. They both have gone up quite a bit, and I'm just
Right.
curious about both of those.
The supply line, first of all, that is under health, and those are the the EpiPens. And let me just give you a little bit of a story on that, not long, but there's a program called EpiPens for Schools. And so in the past, they've been able to provide EpiPens for us. It's always been a little iffy, but they've always been able to come through. 2 years ago, I believe, we put it in the budget, and then we didn't need it. This year, the information that we're getting is that their supply for EpiPens is really low, and that even if we request 4, let's say 4 kid and 4 adult, we're not necessarily going to get them. And the fear of not having an EpiPen in your buildings is just something that we can't support, so we have to put it into the budget.
Gotcha, absolutely.
So parents whose child have an allergy don't have to supply those themselves?
They can, but they're not mandated to.
But
I'm sure you answered this, I'm sorry. I lost track now. Don't worry about it. Yes, the certified salary line.
Okay.
What position was that, 83,000?
That is the
So that's what I just want to make sure that's
Right.
where we put it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
What are the supplies for speech?
Speech supplies could be, it could be anything from oral motor activities, tongue depressors, it could be even low-tech devices, number of things. And it could
Why
be-
such a large increase?
Well, that also includes any testing. We have the one test right now that resonates with me, it's called the SELF. It needs to be re-standardized, so we have to repurchase those tests, otherwise the data that we get from them isn't valid. So every, I would say, 4 to 5 years, all of our tests have to be renormed, is the term that they use. And so we have to buy new testing materials, new protocols, and then train our staff on it.
Okay, and finally, hopefully, the professional services went from 0 to 402,000.
Which one is that?
It's 53,200. Health.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, 402, we moved at, you want to talk about that,
Yeah,
Anthony?
I can speak to that. So the top line where you see that there was nothing for 1920, and there's 402,900 for
Yeah.
2021. Right, that is a realignment. So right there in that 402,900 is both ESS programs. The one for Scotticoke and the one for the high school. And the line below that had the ESS for the high school carved out of that line.
Okay.
It moved to the above, and the SMS ESS was not in PPS originally.
Right.
You'll see it
Put it
come
in.
out of the SPED slide when we move to that next. So there are realignments of that ESS program to have both the high school and the middle school ESS programs, not combined with any of the other programs that Mrs. Olson provides there.
And that purchase service line that is 565,000 includes all of our outside evaluations, which are mandated, all of our occupational therapy, physical therapy, our mandated support training to keep our staff safe, assistive technology consultant, our additional BCBA. So just gives you an idea of everything that's built into that budget that services the whole district.
And so this is one of those realignments. We thought it better not to have either the ESS programs mixed with the dozen or so items that Mrs. Olson just went over. So the ESS programs are both moved to the line above and total to 402,900.
Okay. It's cleaner.
anything else? Facilities?
We'll have an opportunity to discuss capital, so I'll hold a lot of my questions for that,
Okay.
because as you know, many of yours are woven into that, and I haven't completed mine.
Just on facilities director, it's only a .5 position.
It's split 2
It's
pages.
split.
Custodial and maintenance.
It's
Turn to the
between
next
both
page.
programs.
Okay.
It's a one FTA, just split.
Because I had that highlighted until I turned the page. Saw the rest of it now.
Any other questions on facilities? Doga?
DOGA, we're going through that too. There's a lot in DOGA, there's a lot of
Yep.
information.
I could speak to it a little bit, maybe if everyone would be okay with it, instead of jumping back and
Yes.
forth. We'll discuss the page a little bit. In the slide, there's just the page again, and then we can ask the individual questions about, like the first one, the board's budget. and ask any questions, any and all things to do with board, and then jump to the next one instead of doing DOGA all as one and then going back to questions.
However you want to do it. There's a lot of, I unfortunately have a lot of questions.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay, so the first one, and these are just pulling, the slides that are shown here are exactly what's in the book, and it allows the audience to follow along if they don't have slides.
Page 66.
Yep.
Yep.
So this is page 66. The only changes here, I've outlined in the 3 bullet points in the bottom, mainly have to do with, there are only 2 changes, I'm sorry. One to the legal services line, and I've identified that there are actually 3 pieces built into there. And then the other increase is in the advertising line, which you can see through actuals through the previous years. We've actually spent more than the amount we have budgeted now.
I have a quick question on that.
Yep.
You have settlement in year 3 or 4. What's the dollar amount of that?
I believe it's 21,400.
Thank you. Is it anticipated a similar dollar amount for 404?
Yes.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions, details, roll up or otherwise for board? Okay. Office of the Superintendent, different than the board here. Any of the sections of DOGA that have staffing related to them, they're shown as well. And these appear later in Appendix C.
Right.
The only proposed increase here and change that's not tied to salaries has to do with what Superintendent Parker mentioned earlier as part of one of the budget drivers. We're funding half of that NEAS strategic plan,
Yep.
portion of the graduate program, for $17,500.
Right. And that's where that is. Yep.
Yep. Moving on to the Department of Human Resources, this is where it gets a little bit different from what you've seen.
Bless you.
And if I could step back for 1 second, if you remember in past years, DOGA has been 2 pages.
Yes.
One chart with a whole bunch of stuff thrown in and not very clear.
No context. Yeah.
Right, no context. So we're trying to give it a little bit of a different spin here, and I'm open to, after this process, any, questions or feedback. So here at the top, what I've shown you is human resources as you've seen it year over year in the past. The only thing that's here is an increase in salaries for contractual obligations. The bottom section there are things that have been in other sections of DOGA that frankly, when it was all in one big ball, so to speak, it was okay. It kind of fit, but now that we've separated them out properly, the degree changes in turnover, salary savings, those are within the Department of Fiscal Services budget in years past. The substitute lines for teachers and paras, those were split out in the past between Department of Instruction and SPED. And the overtime for secretaries and part-time, district-wide, not just for central office, any secretarial part-time overtime was within the Fiscal Services Department. It does not make sense to have it there. We are realigning it here to Human Resources. Instead of giving you one big chunk of a chart again, for this first year, we're keeping it vanilla up top, and then below are the things that we're adding from other places in the budget. That's why we kept it, so you see the top chart is going up 2.16%. The bottom section has a reduction because we are changing the turnover certified salary savings by 50.
That's what I have a question on. Walk me through those numbers,
Sure.
how we're getting to that.
The degree changes, that first line item there, there's never any expenditures against there, nor would one expect there to be.
Right, it's the turnover salary
Right.
savings.
Yep. So the turnover salary savings, that's an amount we think we can adjust this year, make the additional adjustment of $50,000 on this year's budget and still come in at a positive number for certified salaries at the end of 2021.
Okay, so we're taking that reduction.
That's what's in the request for the superintendent's proposed is an adjustment of
Right,
50.
I see that.
Yes.
But my comment to that is we were a little nervous last year, or,
Yeah.
and now we're upping it,
Sure.
okay? which I know that's a yes, and I know that that's the avenue we're going with, I think that we watch this every month, we are very clear on it. It makes me a little nervous, you know, because this number is a large number, and I was a little surprised that we were upping it based on last year's conversations, but it is what it is. We feel confident we can do that.
Yeah, and while not directly tied to students, like the number that Ms. Olson has for out-of-district placements, these are both kind of levers that you can adjust what tolerance of risk you want to take.
Right, yeah. And that's why, but with the number being up, that's exactly what, because we can move that number.
Certainly.
Exactly,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions on that section? I'll move on to fiscal services here. Increase is 2.19%. And the line items are identified. The big drivers here, other than certified and non-certified salaries, is the increase for liability, auto, and property insurance that we get jointly through Chrome.
What page you
Oh,
on?
I'm sorry, did I jump?
Right, I'm on page
sorry.
2.
The slide, or,
Are we looking for it to be 71?
Fiscal services.
sure,
We didn't go
Right,
over
the
69.
benefits.
benefits, and I will go back to fiscal services, I apologize.
That's right.
Benefits section here is up 1.76%. You've
Right.
usually seen a much larger increase here.
No kidding.
What I've done is I've gone through and identified and put a bullet point for each one of those items, what actually gets budgeted for there, whether it's the generic ones like FICA and Medicare, the pension number, that number comes from the town finance director each year. The unemployment insurance, national employment is quite low. This amount we've adjusted 2 years ago. We haven't adjusted since, the actual support leaving it alone. Next item, health insurance. Big topic, a lot of words on the page. What I tried to do here is break down how our actuarial gives us the indicator that the town is also using of 8%. That's trend. So why don't we see 8% in that line item? Well, once we do the bullet points here, I identify that in that line item, other than SPP, the first item is we have employee assistance program through Cigna that we budget for, dental insurance, Humanavision. We have Teamsters who are on their whole health plan. And we have the employees who are at the state partnership. Those ones that are on the state partnership have gotten the 8% projected from our actuarial.
Right.
When we compare that to our blending, because we went into state partnership with town and Board of Ed together, that amount for the Board of Ed would require only a 7.1% increase.
So that's the number we're using.
No.
We're
I'll
using
pause you-
5.3.
I'll pause you there.
Go ahead.
I'll pause you there. So that, I'm just trying to say how we get to the bottom number.
Right.
The number that we're using in the end, year over year, is the 2.38%.
Okay.
We start with the 8%, which is SPP trend. New Milford, blended Board of Ed number, that translates to a 7.1. When we take the, when we take the 7.1 for SPP and blend it with items 1 through 4 up top,
We're coming to 5.3.
we come down to the 5.3 that we required year over year in our budget. And then the town finance director has given indication that we can use an internal service offset of $250 to $1,000. And it's my understanding that the town is taking a similar offset here. What's happening in SPP over the next 2 years is that Litchfield County is going to have a lower overall rate than some of the other counties. They're become regionalized. While the actuarial does not have the individual budgeted amounts that would impact the town of New Milford, through meetings with the town finance director, myself, Dr. Parker, all the stakeholders involved, it's been decided on their end that both the town and Board of Ed can take relief from internal service fund because we're going to be billed for lower rates in the coming year.
Right, there's my question. Okay, so that's why I came in with the 5.3, because technically, without that release,
Yes.
we're looking at, you're coming in with 5.3.
If you
right?
If you roll back
Okay.
to 250.
Right, so I'm gonna stop you there. So let's talk about the internal service fund. There were conversations, and I was surprised to see this in here because I hadn't heard any follow-up to this. And I know it was there was a couple conversations, so that was one of the first things I looked for, quite frankly. And I think we should be having this conversation. So in the past, when we've had ISF relief, and we've taken, put that into a budget, you're adjusting the medical line, correct?
Correct.
Right, so if we're adjusting the medical line and we're getting that relief through the ISF, how does that set us up for next year? Will it, A, create a hole or not because the rate's going to be lower? So help me understand what that puts us for next year.
It will create a hole for next year.
That's why I'd like new board members to be conscious in the town, because we're constantly, or I should say, we are trying to keep our numbers low. We're trying to look at other avenues to do that, but there's a trade-off for that. Because next year, before we even open our book, we're negative $250,000. And I want to be very transparent about that. And that's exactly what I was looking for when I opened this book. So I think that while I appreciate the collaboration, I think it's, I do think it's something that we need assistance on. We're trying to run a tight budget for the community. They need to know that when you look about and say, why are you up $250,000 right away? Here we are, without even opening the book.
Any other question on the health insurance? I have some notes about here about the disability insurance, the life.
Just a comment on overall health insurance. I mean, this was a town issue. Our insurance could be much more devastating.
Yes.
I think that when the community sees our budget, they see a number, but there's also a cost avoidance here that's not captured in this page, and it's substantial.
Yep. If we were still under
And I think
the
that
self-insured
should be noted.
model with Cigna, you wouldn't be seeing the 8% trend. You would be seeing a 13 to 17% trend on an overall bigger number to begin with.
So one last question, and I won't, because this whole, digging the hole thing just drives me crazy, but sometimes we also had a $200,000 revenue offset
Sure.
that
That's
we
discussed.
carried over
Yep.
into, where we are now. So that's part of this, is it not, or no?
No, I've separated them out. So what you're talking about is the offset at referendum from audit.
Of using our end-of-the-year
Right.
balance towards, but you parceled those out?
I parceled those out. We'll get there, but
Got it.
but
Okay,
the hole
thank you.
that transaction created in building the 2021 budget is the same hole that would be created by taking in the ISF insurance offset.
But to
here.
my point, it's in this, we're living it.
We're living the $200,000.
That's it, exactly.
Yes.
So if we don't do anything,
We're 200,000.
we're 200,000. So because those minutes were very clear from those town minutes, I think it's fair to say that the board was concerned about that process, not only on an audit basis, but on, redoing everything, could it be done, how it would be done, and moving forward in this budget. So right away, we're looking at $200,000
Yep.
in
And
this
when we go
budget.
back to fiscal services, if I could just really quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I cite the actual minutes from that meeting.
I bet, I have them right here.
To double back. Yes, Mr. Bailey.
And you did account
I-
for it, you did take it out.
I raised this issue last year when we went through this process. Ms. Fallenbach was a little bit more diplomatic about it than I am. The town did us no favor, in my opinion, of borrowing money we didn't have, and I brought it up last year. And it was just smoke and mirrors, for lack of a better word, on the town side to us last year. And turn around, it was that 200. That, they in essence lent us money we didn't have. And I think the town council did a disservice, and I know I raised that issue last year. I might have been a little less diplomatic last year about it, but
We all appreciate it.
you were awesome.
So I'm going to jump to fiscal services, but I'm going to go to page 72 actually first. if you'll indulge me, instead of going to 71, to go to 72, because this is just what we were talking about here, the $200,000. I tried to do my best to identify what actually happened at referendum time to make the 1920, and the consequence on building the 2021 budget. And that truth is right there, that it was a day one hole of $200,000. And it's been absorbed here, still at the 282, and that's just through the extensive work in evaluating any new requests, those things that you saw on that slide number 2 by Dr. Parker. Some of those things potentially couldn't happen because of that $200,000 hole.
That's exactly right.
And we've still been able to come in at a respectable percentage, and that's reducing, the second bullet there at the bottom, reducing repurposing funds within the current budget.
Oh, no, scratch.
And it still says 307 here. but
I
it
was
is
just gonna
282.
say, if the budget, well, this will be
Good
changed,
catch.
it
Yes.
may
Yep.
be
But
changed.
this is the new proposed.
Good catch, thank you. The main, jumping back to 71, thank you. The main piece of fiscal services here represents a 2.19% increase. The KERMA piece, that we share that with the town, we don't share funding for that, we just share the same risk management consultant, and that's KERMA. They give us those increases. Any questions on, I guess, pages 60,
I've asked this before, and I'm sorry. I'll ask it.
69 to 72, I think we just covered there.
Anthony, I've asked
Yes.
this, and for the life of me, I can't remember, so I'm gonna write that. Where's Munis in this?
It's in fiscal services, in the professional services line. So it'd be the third
Yep,
one down,
Got it.
in the 87,383.
And the lifespan of that debt?
I want to double check on that for you.
Thank
And I
you.
can bring that tomorrow night for adoption.
Perfect.
The actual breakout, how much of that 87 is the munis fee, and what, we're year 7 of 10, or whatever
I
the case
appreciate
may
it,
be.
'cause in my mind, it's actually part of a capital, I mean, it's something that we built in, we have to, we have to run it out, so.
Right, but it's always been embedded
I
in our
know,
operating.
yeah, I got it.
Sometimes I'd like to just highlight some aspects of what we do, so the town understands it. But our benefit portion of our budget is $11.5 million. And that's a lot we have to cover. It never goes down.
Correct, that amount is captured on page 69.
Right. Not only does it not go down, but we do our best to control those expenditures. And without some of this work, you'd be looking at something much higher.
Right there, I went through pages, I believe, 69 through 72. 73, I don't have a slide to present. Mr. Rush went through in his presentation. Here is how it's displayed by line item. There is an overall decrease. The main driving factors here are the reduction in funds needed to fund those copiers, because we're proposing to move to 5-year leasing cycle, and the capital costs, those project lead the way items have been moved to the 5-year capital plan, no longer part of the operating, similarly to the Chromebooks. That's on 73, and the individual line item breakout is on 74. There's been several realignments here. There was items for technology within DOI that have now been properly encapsulated in technology. There's the copy leases that reside in my budget and fiscal services, which is now captured here in technology. And there's been movement of Chromebooks and Project Lead the Way stuff onto the 5-year capital plan. So there's a lot of movement within technology, but I think it better represents a line item budget-wise for the work that's actually done by technology in the district. Do you have any questions on page 73 or 74?
Just on 73, I appreciate the notation at the bottom that even though the capital is zeroed out in the 1920, we did go ahead and capture those projects throughout the year.
Yes.
We're drawing on them. So it doesn't mean that the projects were not done. It means that the capital was zeroed out and we went through them through another avenue in getting our capital reserve.
Page 75. A very small slide with some very big numbers. Here, we just captured our district courier salary services for that person, and also our transportation contract for general education with All-Star. This is in the third year of a five-year contract. It has a 3% increase. That's a contractual obligation. It's not salary that we have to meet for 2021, and that's $117,119.
Could you just clarify for me how many buses are in that line item?
If I could also get you that number
Sure.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
So we have
I
an
have a
accurate
number, I'm not
number.
sure it's right in my head.
Yep.
Okay, capital?
I don't know that we necessarily have any, I don't think we have a slide per se for the five-year capital plan. But Mr. Rush and Mr. Madret went through and described their projects within their, each of their divisions. And I, or any of the one of the two of them, or Dr. Parker, or anyone can answer any questions that anyone has about the five-year capital and what is in this year's request.
I have the last year's capital that I pulled. I don't see, we don't have a line item for that in here.
Last year's capital was
Right.
zeroed out.
Exactly. I know, but we didn't have, rightfully so, it's at zero, but we didn't have an explanation of what we were asking for. Do you know what I mean? That was cut, that we went through another route of getting it. So I went and I pulled it to see what we had requested and how we zeroed it out and things like that. So my question would be, beginning with facilities. The security enhancements of they're district-wide, 125,000. We discussed this briefly last year, I believe.
That's subcommittee, yeah.
Yes, okay. And is there any way to take that dollar amount and stagger it? Or you're saying take the entire 125, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
To divide it up a little bit more. Because just, I'm sure every board member knows this, but when we draw on our capital, if we approve this, it's not really, is it fair to say, Anthony, it's not really, it doesn't affect our operational budget?
It doesn't affect your operational budget as long as you go into the revenue section and make
And
the
make it the
corresponding
same.
offset.
The same, which means that if we're taking $525,000 out of our capital and our revenue shows us $525,000, it's a zero impact to the board. But it does mean that we're authorizing that these projects go through, that we want to draw on them and make them happen. So when we take a look at these, because they're here, and I'm not saying they're not valid, what I'm saying is, you know, we have a concern over what is in our capital reserve. We're always concerned, what are we spending out of our capital reserve? Is it too low? So the question, which I'm sure you have the answer, is what is today's balance in the capital reserve?
So when I checked the capital reserve balance today, the results of the audit still had not been posted to the account.
Right, huh?
But
Okay.
once it is, the balance should be $661,200.
Okay.
I will follow up with the town on that. We've been busy with budget.
I-
No, I'm just saying, I will do that.
Right, and
To make
so
sure it gets
if,
posted.
subject to which the audit was
Already
done.
presented,
Okay, so
yes.
we're assuming that it would be $661,000.
$661,200.
You're asking that we spend $525,000.
It's the administrative team here, it's not just.
Not you,
Yep.
that is, you know what, actually, I deserve that, I'll give you that, okay. Administrative team, score one for you. The administrative team is,
It's a point well taken because it's a large percentage of the
Okay.
remaining balance that's there. But if you look at the scope of projects that actually need to get done, there are things that need to get done.
not questioning the validity, what I'm doing is, I'm just pointing out that's a different conversation. What I'm just merely pointing out is that if the board members approve this, we will be reducing our capital reserve to under $200,000.
136,000.
Which is the lowest it's ever been, probably in the 18 years that I can recall. So I just want to put that on the table. That's a very serious move, and the reason why the capital reserve was designed is because we had a large expenditure that came in, I believe, on a chiller or a boiler, and I think it was, I have the minutes in here somewhere, and we couldn't pay for it. And the town had to come up with a supplemental appropriation and go that avenue, and so now we came up with capital reserve. So the point being is that if we have some kind of large expenditure, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'm sure you have a concern over this number to some degree, and I'm sure there was rather, robust conversation over this. There's no doubt that these are things that I see validity. Personally, I could tweak it, but I'll leave it to everybody else. But that is a large number that we're pulling out of the capital reserve. And it frightens me. And I want to be very clear about that. I think it's aggressive. That's why I'm asking about the staggering of the security enhancements, because when I pulled last year's capital to take a look at it, we were staggering more, okay?
We were. And in the fall, you recall at Facilities and Operations, we talked about our current system was no longer being supported. We got notified by our vendors. So there is a bit of risk involved. That number is for all 5 schools to be converted to the new system. Could it be broken up or staggered? Yes. But
there's a risk.
There is a risk, and that's exactly right.
And the risk is unfortunate in all of our budget right now. Is the risk worth drawing our capital reserve down to, 130,000 versus that kind of risk? I just want to put that conversation out there because we do have some new board members, and I think that that's a conversation you all need to think about.
It's a very good point, Wendy. And as we have lower and lower budgets that are put forth by the town, this is unfortunately an end result. So my question is, if it needs to be spent and we can't take it out of operation, what do we do next year when you're asking for 1.4 million?
That's a good question.
We are not going to have that. So now are we going to the town and letting them know this, that listen, we're depleting our capital reserve, so in year 2, you're gonna need to bond a couple $1 million so that we can get these projects done?
Well, to be fair, this year we did work in collaboration with town. Off the list, I'm not sure if you mentioned the playground compliance.
No, I didn't.
But that's something that we had also collaborated on. And we have had meetings with the town, bringing our other capital to them, correct, Brian?
Yep.
Saying, it hasn't even made the list, but we know we need it. And there has been some movement there, and we're very appreciative of it. I just, I'm not going to spend all night going through my list. I would hope that everybody takes a look at this, because if you are going to make a motion to move this capital plan and spend less out of it, you've got to adjust the revenue piece.
Correct.
So I just want to give you the avenue to give that thought when you take a look at it. That's all I'm saying. I think it's a very frightening number.
On that point, and to Tammy's point, this is a bigger and larger conversation with the town. You took my question, what are we going to do about the 1.8 next year if we have nothing left in our capital reserve?
And we're certainly not going to have 1.8 left over at the end of the year balance.
Exactly.
Are you confident that, I think that's pretty fair to say, yes.
We're not going to have that one. So this is a larger conversation with the town of New Milford and town council and the mayor, that there's all these expectations on us, and every year we seem to be the subject of a lot of conversation, and they're asking us to do, where do we take $1.8 million in cuts next year? What do we do, close 2 more buildings? There's a point where, with the town, I'll be honest, how do they expect us to run a school district?
I would say that in what's happened in years past is that number has been, much higher. That number has in some of the past years been $1 million, and what's happened is some of those projects have been kicked out years.
Oh, I know the answer. I'm not looking at it. I'm making a statement. Don't worry, I know exactly where you're coming from. it's a conversation, it's a point we need to raise on the record.
The only way that we could reduce that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if we are favorable towards the end of this year and take a look at some of these projects. That's the only other way. But it's sure not gonna be $525,000 worth of projects that we're gonna become favorable. And even then, at the end of the year, you're prioritizing, you know, safety and everything else. So it's just not gonna happen.
That is the only other way that we would do it on our own.
That's exactly, thank you for the clarification, on our own. So I'm sorry to be so vocal about it, but between that and the 250,000 surprise in the ISF, which is great, but it's still, and the 200,000 that we're carrying over from last year, it gets very frustrating.
Anybody else have one? Okay, I have a question. The vehicle replacement, what is it replacing?
So currently, we have a 2002 pickup truck, which is completely rotted in the frame, and it's no longer seaworthy, so we're taking it offline, and it's on our January disposal list to the town.
So what is it, why do we need a 350, I guess is my question.
Sure. So basically, would be another plow vehicle for us, because that's what it's replacing. Gives us the ability to open schools with just minimal delays. And this is state contract pricing.
So we just bought a truck year
We did.
before last?
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
30% of our fleet is over 12 years old. And they work hard.
That's, same question. The scrubbers.
Yes.
We didn't do that, did we buy a scrubber last year?
No, we've been staggering that as well.
Okay, that's what I seem to remember, okay. And how many do we have?
At least one per building. The bigger buildings have 2 or 3.
And the age?
Oh, I'd have to look that up for you.
Would you please? Thank you, because you know, some things, history just repeats itself. We've had the scrubber conversation over the years as well, so.
770,000 square feet of space.
I hear ya. I hear ya.
Okay, anything else on capital? Revenue? I'm sorry?
We're gonna do all this now?
Any questions? Okay, well, we'll do this. Any questions on the remaining book, or any questions from previous, or anything you want to ask before tomorrow?
Since we're going down this road now, I know we have a lot to do yet tonight.
Are we on the revenue page?
Yes.
Okay.
What
I didn't
happened
mean that to
to
be
the
rude.
school musical?
They're gonna keep their money.
What about it?
They're keep the $10,000 in 2021.
Normally, we pull it back and put it into revenue, but we want it to stay in their school musical account so that they're not having to ask permission to get the money from us to spend it, and we trickle it throughout the year. We give it right back, so it really is a wash.
One
for
other
them.
question, and it will be prefaced the way I do things. What outrageous fee are we charging for students to park at the high school now?
I think it's
$225.
Yeah, 225. And so you see here a reduced amount projected next year for revenue. Just give me one moment, I'm sorry. In
You reduced it by 5,000.
the, right, we're reducing the projected revenue because since we did change the fees.
Less than being sold?
Correct.
And so at some point, we're gonna reach a goal where we're gonna charge so much for this, that nobody's gonna drive to high school anymore. And I've got the whole bit that we pay for the $4-point-something million for buses. But this particular fee falls on 2 categories of students, 11th and 12th graders.
Well, I don't think it's fair to just say that it's because we charge. I mean, I think our enrollment's down there too, so.
So our revenue bump up
Yeah,
is-
well, to say 225 is honestly an outrageous fee.
You know my feeling on that.
I know.
Big yellow fella stops right at your driveway.
So,
You know what, why don't we just tell students, stop driving to school?
am I to understand that a lot of these revenues have been bumped up?
Yeah, I can just go through them really quickly. I know it's quite late, but this is the last, I think, slide in here. The
I
excess-
think we should.
The excess cost piece here.
That's
we're-
substantial.
Right, that is, we're expecting more excess cost revenue in 2021.
And how do we get that information? And I don't mean that to jump in a bit, how are we assessing that we're expecting more?
That comes from a state report that we
Okay,
certify
right,
for
yep.
excess cost. And at the same time here, we are reducing the percentage that we are expecting to get back.
Gotcha.
The 1920 budget is built on a 68% reimbursement rate.
Thank you.
And we are moving down to a 66% reimbursement rate for the 2021 budget.
Thank you.
The next item down for Medicaid, we're getting better at tracking every dollar there. So we are budgeting for an increased revenue there, and that's based on 4 years of actuals. The third line down for FOI fees, that's relatively flat. We don't collect much money for that. The next item down, building use fees. So this you're going to see tomorrow night on the board reports, but there was a request to have those revenue items reclassified, like they say transfer other and stuff
Right.
like that. In December, we talked about that.
Right.
So what those two revenue items are, we've renamed them in munis, so they come out in the report. Those correlate to what the building use fee, what the base rental is, and what the custodial portion is on top of that. We heard that at operations for the last 2 months. So those items for next year, we've kept flat, okay? If we were looking at back at past year actuals, and Mr. Moret spoke to this, the fact that we weren't meeting the budget for those items, we went and redid the fee schedule. I'm not 100% certain how that fee schedule is going to matriculate into a different dollar budget amount for this, so we have not increased the projected revenue for that for next year.
Right, right, that makes sense.
For either the base rental or the custodial piece.
That makes sense.
The next item down, the Excel tuition, that's based off of projections for
Sure.
those in the 3s and 4s programs. There's an increased amount in there. In the special ed tuition, right now, the current budget, I believe, is just built on one, and I think Ms. Olson, the next year is built on an additional student with extra services.
Right.
And the gate receipts, we've kept flat for next fiscal year. If we look at a 2-year average, keeping that flat might be positive or minus about $1,000. Parking, we talked about already. We haven't been meeting the budget since the rate change, so I've adjusted the budget projection down here. And the old budget method here was to just increase the prior year's budget by the amount we collected over budget in the year previous. So we're getting away from that practice and taking a look at what do we actually collect.
Got it.
And the revenue, last item there, pay to participate, parking permit, school musical, that is not in the budget anymore. We're proposing not to take $10,000 out of that program. So we have to eliminate that revenue, which is a $10,000 add to the budget. The next item down, pay for participate, there was nothing there in the current 1920 budget, nor are we suggesting or proposing anything for the 2021 budget. It's still a line item here to show because there was a budget for 18-19 and there were actuals shown. The numbers might look a little different than what you're used to seeing for that pay to play because there was a revised budget amount. That's not
Exactly.
shown here.
That's it, because we had counted on, yeah. Okay.
The last item is the offset from capital reserve. Capital reserve is eliminated from the capital, 5-year capital projects were eliminated from 1920 and financed the reserves elsewhere, so we had to eliminate the revenue piece of that. In 2021, through Mr. Rush and Mr. Monret's 5-year capital plan, they're requesting $525,000, we are requesting as a district, of 5-year capital money. The money that would fund those items comes from this withdrawn revenue, which would come from our capital reserve. Those items need to match. If you were to decide that we're going to take out 5-year capital completely and do it the way we did it this year, go back in the fall, you would have to adjust this revenue item by the same amount.
Which is still an even offset to the overall budget.
It would not change, correct. it
There's
would
no
not
budgetary
change-
impact by
Right.
making one zero on one side and one zero on the other.
Correct, it would not change the 282, as long as you do them
In sync.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you for allowing all those questions. I know it was a long night, but
Budget.
it's important.
Anything you want to know before tomorrow night?
If we have some questions.
I do have, I have one question.
Right.
Mr. Shagru, you had mentioned that the math teacher you were dropping due to SAT prep. Did I understand that correctly? The reduction in the math teacher is due to the elimination of SAT prep?
With the reduction of the math teacher, we would eliminate SAT prep.
Okay, why are we not doing the same thing with an English teacher?
I don't know, got past Dr. Parker, that question.
Why are we not doing the same thing with an English teacher?
He said he could cut a math teacher, so.
Okay, because I
that
just,
was- I understand. I have the same.
okay, that's all I needed. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we will open up to public comment.
I'll go. Just a quick request, can you please put the revised budget on the website for the public to view? I took pictures of somebody's packet that wasn't here tonight, but we get hit hard in this town of a lack of transparency on the Board of Ed side. I think that's improved over the last several years, 4 or 5 years, and they're starting to build up a little bit of trust again, but if the budget is wrong there, which it is, it's going to show that we're hiding something according to a lot of people in
The budget and slides will
town.
be there tomorrow. We wanted to have the
Yeah,
board meeting first.
Good,
and-
yeah, no, thank you, appreciate that, that was it.
Anyone else for public? Okay. I need a motion that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing security strategy as well as the deployment of security personnel and/or devices affecting security, as well as emergency plans in the New Milford Public Schools, discussing non-bargaining unit employment and salary, and invite into the session Dr. Carrie Parker, Ms. Alicia DeCorpo, Ms. Ellie Baldelli, Mr. Anthony Giovanni, Mr. Brandon Rush, Mrs. Laura Olson, Mr. Kevin Monrette, New Milford Police Chief Spencer Cerruto, Lieutenant Lee Grabner, and Lieutenant Earl Wheeler.
So moved.
Second.
All in, any discussion? All in favor? Cynthia, you in favor?
Yeah.
Okay, that's everyone.
I was too quick.
Good by 8.
All right, we're just gonna recess till tomorrow.
Okay.
See you tomorrow at 7.
Did you
Thank
offer
you,
the
guys.
public any opportunity to speak?
We already did have two bites at the apple.
Okay.